On a summer evening in 1995, a teen boy named Thadius Phillips was abducted from his Wisconsin home. Phillips would go on to endure 2 days of bone-breaking torture, barely escaping with his life. Our episodes deal with serious and often distressing incidents. If at any time you feel like you need support, please contact your local crisis centre. This episode involves a crime against a child. It may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised. On July 14th, 1995, Thadius Phillips had just moved to Baraboo, Wisconsin with his sister and parents, Connie and Donald. It was a small, safe town where the kids could play outside in a young community of families and young teens, and families could leave their doors open on warm summer nights without worrying about undesirables. Or so they thought. On a warm summer's evening, 2 weeks later, on Saturday, July 29th, 1995, the family were enjoying the evening watching TV. Thad and his sister had fallen asleep on the sofa. Their parents would let them both rest as they went into a different room. A few hours later, Thad was picked up and carried away. Still half asleep, he assumed it was his father carrying him to bed, which was a common occurrence.
And I opened up my eyes a little bit, and I'm being carried through my den in our new house, and it's nothing really new to me because my mom and dad carried me to bed when I'd fall asleep before.
Disorientated, Thad found that he was outside, being carried by an unfamiliar, older teen boy. The boy eventually put him down, and Thad realised he was outside a neighbour's house. The boy seemed friendly, asking Thad if he could help him with his car. Thad, still sleepy and confused, decided to help him, concluding that the boy was only a few years older than him and seemed friendly enough. Thad then went with the boy into the house. Once there, the mysterious boy introduced himself as Joe. He named other boys Thad knew and said they would be there soon as Joe was throwing a party. Joe appeared to be home alone, and the house did not seem to be set up for a party. It appeared to be like any normal messy home, with posters, car models and snacks littered around. Joe was friendly to Thad, and this helped settle his nerves.
Being the nicest guy in the world, talking about models and baseball cards and football cards, and that's what I was into at the time.
Joe asked Thad if he wanted to see his card collection upstairs. Thad followed, unaware of the violence that awaited him.
We were sitting on his bed. He was sitting next to me, and just all of a sudden he stood up.
Joe quickly shed his friendly teen persona. Joe, who was 17 years old and much larger than Thad, grabbed him and threw him on the dirty bed. He then jumped on him, grabbing his right ankle. He began to twist Thad's foot around unnaturally until the bone above his ankle snapped and splintered. Thad was in a state of shock, quickly becoming aware he was in big trouble. Joe pulled back and started mumbling to himself. Thad took this opportunity to run downstairs and make his escape. Feeling more shock than pain, Thad quickly realised that he probably wouldn't get very far with a broken ankle.
Kind of looked away, and as soon as he looked away, I got up and ran as fast as I could down the stairs. Can't run very fast with a broken ankle. But I got down the stairs and through his living room into the kitchen before he finally caught up to me and got behind me and put me in a hole, dragged me back into his living room.
Thad then suffered further injuries. Joe would stretch Thad's leg upwards towards his head and leaned in until his thigh bone snapped, causing him to pass out. Thad later woke up on the couch with Joe sitting next to him. The nice persona of Joe was back. He would talk as if nothing was wrong, which caused more confusion and fear for Thad. Trying to figure a way out, he told Joe that if he let him go, he wouldn't tell anyone what had happened and would say he tripped over a table. Joe maintained that no one would believe this. Thad then attempted to reason with Joe, asking why he would do something like this to him. Joe explained that he enjoyed the sound and feeling of bones breaking at his whim, and described how much he loved it.
He enjoyed breaking bones. He enjoyed the sound of breaking bones.
Joe would talk as if he had no choice but to take children from their homes and subject them to this. He showed no empathy towards Thad and didn't feel his pain. Thad was Joe's toy now. Later that night, Joe went up to bed and told Thad to get some sleep. As soon as Joe was not around and unable to sleep through the pain that had been inflicted on him, Thad began studying every corner of the house that he could see from the sofa. He was looking for weapons, phones, and anything that could help him escape. Apart from mouldy leftovers and piles of dirty clothes, there was nothing in sight that could help Thad. But Thad would not give up. Thad's only thought was survival.
Thad is a pretty straightforward kid, and he didn't want to die. So he was willing to do what it would take.
Thad realised he needed to get off the couch and get away. Only then did the pain truly kick in. Shivers went through his body as he was left paralysed with unthinkable pain. Unable to move or sleep, Thad resigned himself to staying put on the couch. Thad had hoped that the terror may be over.
A little bit of me maybe thought that maybe he was going to let me go that next morning, but that was never his intention. I was pretty much sure there was people like that in the world. I just didn't think they'd live half a mile away from me.
The next morning, Thad asked Joe if he could call his parents. To his surprise, Joe said, "Sure," handing him the phone. As Thad dialed their number and held the phone close to his ear, expecting it to ring, he heard Joe laughing in the background. Joe had cut the cord. Thad was so intent on surviving that he didn't express any anger or emotion. He acted as if Joe's so-called joke was funny and tried to befriend him.
That's exactly what I was trying to do, is to talk to him, maybe kind of be friends with him so he wouldn't want to hurt me no more. I was just hoping to hear a knock on the door, maybe my dad at the door, but that never happened.
For 2 hours, they watched TV together. Then, just as the day before, Joe stood up and looked at Thad with a manic, enraged expression. He picked him up and carried him upstairs. He threw him back on the bed and repeated what he had done to his right leg on his left leg. Thad felt adrenaline before pain, attempting to get up and fight back.
Punched him in the back, and he turned around and put a pillow over my face and told me that if I didn't stop fighting, he's gonna break my back or my neck.
From that point on, Thad made the decision not to fight back. He decided to do what he was told, whilst thinking of ways to escape. Aside from pretending to act like a friend, Joe also oscillated between torturing Thad and giving him care. He showed Thad his collection of leg braces, bandages, and piles of white socks stuffed in his drawers. He explained that he loved fixing bones after breaking them. Psychologist Dr. John Mayer explains.
There was some childlike almost fascination with making him right, so then he could just again continue to do torture. He had that, forgive the term, captive audience for as long as he wanted. The fun is in making him dysfunctional again.
Joe put Thad in the leg braces and wrapped several socks around his legs and feet until they were thickly padded, spending minutes with each sock, obsessing over it being perfect. In the evening, Joe announced that he'd be going out and left Thad on the bed upstairs. Before Joe left, Thad could hear him speaking to someone downstairs. Thad listened closely. Was someone else in the house? Was it another victim? Thad could not hear the other person's voice and soon realised he was on the phone. That meant there was another phone in the house apart from the one with the cut cord. Thad knew he had to get that phone. This was his only chance at freedom. Joe knew it was risky to leave Thad home alone, but he had a plan.
Before he left Saturday night, he made sure that he busted me up pretty good so that I wouldn't try to leave.
When Thad heard the front door close, he began his own plan. He crawled out of bed and dragged himself to the staircase. His legs were not working, and his only hope were his arms. When he tried to slide down the stairs with his legs first, Thad passed out from the pain. When he woke up, he realised there was only one way to do it. He had to throw himself down the stairs.
Myself down the stairs, and I dragged myself in the living room. And this took, I don't know how many hours it took, but I kept passing it and out and out.
Thad came to and made his way to the kitchen doorway when Joe returned home, this time with his girlfriend in tow.
Thinking be smart, don't make him mad. So I'm laying there and I'm listening and I'm being quiet as hell.
Thad was paralysed with pain and fear, hidden behind the door, listening to Joe flirt with his girlfriend. After the girl left, Joe found Thad hiding behind the doorway. For his insubordination, Thad knew he was in for more bone-breaking torture that night. Thad knew he would die tonight. Thad had been missing for around 24 hours now. As soon as Thad had gone, his parents, knowing that Thad would not just leave, had soon come to the realisation that someone had taken him. Thad's parents, Connie and Donald, got into their car and started driving through the town. They then exited the town and drove around it, hoping to see their son, or at least a clue pointing them to him. Ironically, they never thought to check door to door down their own street.
We drove around and looked around. We went out to the river and I searched the fairgrounds. Just never thought to check house to house because we didn't know any of the neighbors right close. So if I would have probably found him before he was hurt as bad as he was.
On Saturday evening, knowing something was wrong, Connie and Donald filed a missing person report. The officers visited the Phillips home and looked for evidence of foul play, but found nothing. The family were instructed to stay close to the phone in case they had any updates or needed more information. Connie could not stop thinking about her son and where he could be.
I just couldn't believe what was going on, about what's going on. I didn't know what to think. I just wanted to hear from him.
The morning after Thad's escape attempt, Joe woke Thad up with promises of more bone-breaking punishment for trying to escape the night before. He would go on to inflict many more hours of excruciating pain, bringing Thad to the brink of death.
He's jumping on my legs with his knees, and I was just trying to talk to him to keep him away from me.
In between his attacks on Thad, Joe would feign friendship. During this much-needed downtime, Joe would carry Thad to the couch so that the pair could watch movies together, as if nothing was wrong. Joe would speak about his family, his car, how he lived with his brother, and how he had a girlfriend. The most shocking revelation would come when Thad asked him a question. Joe gave him an answer that Thad knew meant he was not leaving here alive. Appearing to know exactly how to hurt someone, Thad asked Joe if he had ever done this before. Convinced that Thad would die by his hand that weekend and would therefore not be caught, he proudly confessed that he had taken the lives of 2 other boys. On July 4th, 1994, 1 year prior, a 14-year-old boy named Chris Steiner went missing. He'd gone to bed early on the 4th of July weekend His dad had seen him asleep and closed his bedroom door. His parents had awakened that morning to find the window screen in Chris's bedroom slashed and muddy footprints throughout the house. Although Chris's parents first thought he had snuck out of the house, they soon came to realise he had likely been kidnapped, noting that the muddy footprints were larger than Chris's feet. On July 10th, Chris's body was found on the banks of the Wisconsin River.
We found a body floating, partially submerged. It was immediately apparent that the body was in very poor condition. There was an advanced state of decomposition.
The cause of Chris's death was attributed to drowning, but due to the condition of the body when it was found, the manner of his death, accident or otherwise, remained undetermined. The police set out to investigate and find Chris's killer fast. One name that came up in the investigation after asking around the school and the neighbours was Joseph, or Joe Clark, a local teenage bully. He was violent and had a knack for targeting younger teenage boys. But this wasn't enough for the police to arrest him.
Well, hearsay, nobody could give me something that directly stated that, yeah, they heard from Joe Clark directly that this is what he said.
Unfortunately, due to lack of evidence, the case went cold. Responding to Thad's question, Joe declared that Chris Steiner was one of his victims. He showed pride in this declaration and was excited to take Thad's life too. This would have to wait, however, as Joe was planning to see his girlfriend tonight, and Thad knew this. As Joe set out to attack Thad some more, Thad stalled by claiming that he could hear the girlfriend.
I'd say, I can hear something.
Eventually, Joe's girlfriend did arrive, so Joe locked Thad inside a closet in the upstairs bedroom before leaving the house to attend a party. All the shattered bones in Thad's legs were causing internal bleeding to build up. As the pain got worse and worse, Thad realised that death was likely imminent. Locked in the closet, Thad felt around for a weapon that he could use to escape and found an old electric guitar. With whatever strength he had left, he smashed the guitar through the closet door.
A panel off the door and was able to unlock it.
Thad crawled down the hallway and again threw himself down the stairs, passing out repeatedly but refusing to give up. Finally, he made it to the kitchen, where he found the phone on the wall. He tugged at the cord until the phone fell down. Luckily for Thad, the buttons were on the phone. Thad dialed 911.
He was so calm and collected that I felt he was playing a prank.
To Thad's relief, the police believed him and arrived at the scene.
Here, it's me.
Sorry. I can't believe the kid busted out of there. Can't believe he's still alive.
When officers found Thad, he was in immense pain and almost every bone in his body was broken. He was swollen and his skin was violet. The paramedics concluded that he had 1 or 2 hours left before his body would have gone into shock and he would have died. Thad's only wish during his time in hospital was to get well soon so that he could testify against Joe. Authorities arrested Joe Clark while he was at a party with his girlfriend, and from there they began to search his house. Police looked for any indication of previous victims, but instead found evidence suggesting that Joe intended to capture and torment more boys. In the house, police located a school notebook which listed names of over a dozen local boys, including some that Thad knew. The boys' names were in different columns, detailing whether or not Joe would be able to kidnap them now or later, and what he wanted to do with them. Part of the list included a column titled the leg thing, suggesting he intended to break the bones of future victims as well.
There were 3 sheets of paper. There were 3 lists. One was called Get to Know. One was called Can Wait. And one was called Leg Thing. There were lists of boys on each of those.
Thad would bravely testify against Joe in both his trial and the trial for Chris Steiner. Not long before Thad was meant to testify in Joe's trial, a 15-year-old boy shot Thad twice in the back. Due to this, the trial was delayed. He was shot by 15-year-old Michael Hubish, a friend and neighbour of Joe's. Hubish would later go on to say that he did not intend on killing Thad. Judge Virginia Wolf rejected this argument, saying she felt the severity of the wound to Thad was enough to support the showing of intent. Thad was shot in the rear left shoulder with a hunting rifle. The bullet travelled up his neck and came out near his ear, cutting his lip. Thad was hospitalised for several days. Michael Hubish would later serve time in juvenile detention for the attempted murder on Thad, but would be released later as an adult. In 2018, Hubish was sentenced to 12 years in prison for repeated sexual assault of a 15-year-old girl. After overcoming more injuries, Thad would later testify that Joe had told him about murdering a boy named Chris the year prior. Police were then able to link this testimony to the murder of 14-year-old Chris Steiner. This came as a surprise, since the pathologist who had examined Steiner at the time had found no sign of any obvious injury that would attribute it to a murder. Then, investigators learned that no X-rays had been taken at the time of the autopsy. Therefore, there was only one way to discover whether Chris Steiner had been subjected to the same bizarre treatment that Thad had endured, and thus to link the 2 crimes to a single perpetrator. They had to exhume Chris Steiner's remains. Once this was done, the forensic pathologist went over the small body once again, and this time, armed with more information, he identified 4 separate breaks in Chris Steiner's legs. It was apparent that had the boy been thrown into the water in this condition, he could not have used his legs to swim and could easily have drowned, as was the cause of death. A boy who had been with Joe in juvenile detention also testified that Joe had bragged about murdering a boy and hanging the body over a tree. However, police were never able to link Joe to a second murder. In October 1997, Joe Clark was found guilty of causing great bodily harm to a child, child enticement, attempted first-degree intentional murder, mayhem, and mental harm to a child. Joe pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the jury believed he was, at least to stand trial, mentally sane. Joe was sentenced to 100 years in prison for the violence afflicted to Thad. To this day, Joe maintains he has no memory of what he did to Thad and claims he is innocent of Chris Steiner's death. His mother backed him up with an alibi. She said that if he had left home on the night Steiner was abducted, she would have known, because he would have passed through her bedroom to get out. However, it was shown that she was a heavy sleeper and that he'd managed to slip by her before. Thus, Joe Clark had no alibi. A jury found him guilty of Chris Steiner's murder, and this case was finally closed with a conviction. Joe would receive an additional 50 years for the murder of Chris Steiner. He later attempted to appeal to some of his convictions based on lack of evidence, but the district court dismissed the case. Thad would go on to sue Joe in civil court for the pain and suffering he faced at the hands of him. Thad won the settlement and was awarded $31,566 in medical damages, $6 million in compensation, and $15 million in punitive damages, for a total of just over $21 million. Thad would never see any of this money. During his 43 hours of captivity, Thad suffered broken bones in almost all of his body. Many years of surgeries and long-term medical care have helped Thad walk and use his legs again, though he still retains a permanent limp. Thad is in his 40s now and has a family of his own. His will to live was nothing shy of astonishing, which he put down to the love for his family. Thank you for joining us on this episode. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media and check out our website at shadowcrimes.com, where mysteries thrive and shadows speak.